For those of you who are here at 10, let's go ahead and get started. On behalf of California State Council on Developmental Disabilities, I welcome you to our first episode of a Festival of Learning and Ideas. I am Laura Larson from Northern California, and my co-host is Mary Ellen Stives from beautiful San Diego. D'Amico Foots Rachel from San Bernardino and Charlotte Andres from Sacramento act as our highly valued technical support. Why a Zoom festival when we are living in a global pandemic and our streets throughout the world are filled with tens of thousands of protesters who declare that Black lives matter and indeed all life matters. The voices call out for great change, and this time their voices will not be dismissed. This festival is held to focus on change in the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We're focusing on the lives that they live. This festival calls for an open heart that welcomes all into the fullness of community life. This festival calls for a time of listening and learning what others have experienced and who will openly share with us the lessons of their journey. This is not 2 hours of listening. This is a call for unity of purpose, a call to connect, to speak out, to create, to develop prototypes, and share, share, share. This is our first episode, and today we lay down a cornerstone from which we will build. In the time of COVID-19, to live, to be alive, we must move to unique designs of services and support. This is a very heavy lift, and we do not have much time to do it. This is a struggle that is global. People are oppressed by myths, segregation, and poverty, oppressed by the way they look, the way they move, the way they speak, the way they don't speak, the way they don't move. Most people with disabilities live in great poverty. They lack the opportunity to create a life where one can dream and find a solid path towards the realization of that dream. Today we have with us from LifeWorks in San Diego, Beth Gallagher and Kirk Hinkleman. LifeWorks is a unique and highly valued supported living agency. Kirk and Beth are the co-authors of the book, Intentional Teaming, Shifting Organizational Culture, and the co-creative of the joyous, and if you haven't experienced it, it is joyous, the joyous planning experience called the Liberty Plan. Kirk and Beth have been attentive students and have grown to be peers with the legends and giants of our field. The incomparable John O'Brien, Connie Lyle O'Brien, the storyteller of the heart who is no longer with us, Judith Snow, the teacher, the thinker, the doer, Hans Meisner, author of Blue Space, and the creative genius, Beth Mount, who has asked us for a very, very long time to imagine a world that works for everyone. That is the question of this day. What does it take to create a world that works for everyone? Perhaps we will gain insight into that question today. If you have questions for us, place them into the chat room. And Mary Ellen is monitoring the chat room, and hopefully we will have time at the conclusion of Beth and Kirk's presentation to answer them. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Kirk Hinkleman and Beth Gallagher. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Laura.
Well, thank you, Laura.
We're really, really happy to be here today. Thank you, Laura, for inviting us to do this. We wanted to share our experiences around the 5 valued experiences and the 5 accomplishments, and really invite people into a different type of listening today. So we're asking you to really open your heart and your minds and think in a different way. We have a lot of change to experience and transcend in the next new cycle that's coming up. A lot needs to change, and a lot needs to change quickly. So we're just asking you to listen deeply, and maybe something will land for you. So.
Okay, great. So, especially during these times, we find it incredibly valuable to begin these sessions with a grounding exercise. I'm going to lead us in a guided meditation. So if we could just kind of get ourselves situated wherever you are. Most of us are in our home. Some of us escaped to the office. But if you're willing to close your eyes, feet flat on the ground or wherever they may rest comfortably. Spine as straight in posture as possible. A posture of dignity and honoring of oneself. Let's take 3 big breaths together, all 250, whatever we are, together as a group, a collective breath. So in through our noses and out through the mouth. In through our nose, out through the mouth. One last big one collectively, in through the nose and out through our mouths. What we're after this morning is a collective pause, a collective breath, a collective stillness. Our breath is essential. Our breath is simple and yet so profound. As we move forward during this meditation and our minds begin to wander or become distracted, we can always return to our breath. The cool air gently in through our nose and the warm air gently leaving. The rise and fall of our chest. Elements present in this practice, providing us with centering and focus. Welcome to the kickoff of the Festival of Learning. Today we find ourselves enveloped in the convergence of storms. Storms both literal and figurative. The pandemic we all live with, evoking fear, panic, anxiety. The grotesque act of murder we witnessed for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, evoking anger, rage, and trembling tears. A movement, one which already existed, fueled now with an energy not felt since the crescendo of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. These storms give us pause. We've been forced to stop, to reflect, to observe what we've been doing. The word essential has been used more in our lives now than ever before. And what comes with that is the idea of what is non-essential. We've had the unique opportunity to notice things, procedures, policies, services, and elements of the greater system we find ourselves in that are non-essential. So our challenge is, what will we do with these identified non-essential elements that comprise our day-to-day lives? Will we be willing to let them go? Will we be willing to move forward, suspending the voices of judgment, cynicism, and fear? Bending the beam of observation, first and foremost, onto ourselves. Being clear about where we stand. Leaning into the importance of leading with open mind, open heart, and open will. Here we sit together today as human beings in unison around the idea that we can affect real, sustainable change. We are willing to stop, identify the non-essential, let go, and make room for an emerging future. A future for all people of all abilities to live meaningful lives, lives of purpose, lives that make sense. Are we creating the conditions necessary for people to thrive, for people to feel like they are members of something greater than themselves? Here's the good news. We have a compass for this. This compass has been around for over 40 years. The 5 valued experiences provide us with simple and profound ways of looking at a person's life and ask reasonable questions as a way of measuring whether that person is actualizing a life that makes sense for them. Where do I belong? Where are the ordinary places that I share with other citizens in neighborhoods and communities? Where do I have choice in my life? Where am I contributing in my life? Where do I feel respected in my life? These are not disability-centered questions. These are basic human questions. Yet we find ourselves lost within the system we work in, complicating things in the name of funding, measurables, outcomes, percentages, regulations. If we aren't careful, we reduce human beings to UCI numbers. So as we exhale today, collectively, let us let go of that which is non-essential. Let's be in stillness for as long as we need to be sure that each step we take into the darkness of the unknown with hopes of transformation, we bring light. We've been playing with the metaphor of cracks in other groups we collaborate with. These storms have created cracks, and it is our call to wedge ourselves into these cracks and hold them open. Hold this tension, for something beautiful is emerging. We are called as agents of change to keep the cracks open. As Leonard Cohen writes, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. All right, when you're ready, you can open your eyes and we'll get going with what we're doing.
So we're asking you to, in this time, to really take a look at where do you stand in this change. You know, the service system, I don't think anybody would argue, is not broken. It's broken. It's been broken for a long time. There's things in it that are beautiful, and there's things in it that are definitely broken. We need to take a look at some things. I mean, the pandemic has really illuminated a lot of things that we could probably do away with, right? But instead of looking at the system as being broken, I implore you to take a look at what is it that you as an individual can do, whether you're sitting there as a provider, a direct support provider, a parent, a self-advocate, a state representative, whatever it is that your role is. Where do you stand? What are you willing to do about it? I mean, the meditation that Kirk just did was about the values of our country as a whole. That didn't, you know, that meant all human beings. I think the civil rights movement includes people with disabilities. The social justice stuff includes people with disabilities. Racial injustice is no different than the institutional injustice that's been happening to people with disabilities for, you know, for forever. It's the same type of thing. It's time for us to figure out what we're going to do about this and make sure that we figure out what we're going to individually do so that we don't keep blaming the system. If we can't move forward one person at a time, it's not going to shift. So while we're discussing this today, what we're wanting you to do is really take a look, take a lens at yourself, look in the mirror and figure out what is it that you're doing that's keeping the system the same, whether it's blame culture, whether it's just not moving forward because you're doing the same thing because it's always been done that way. Whatever it is, just take a look at that. So where do I stand is maybe a question that we want you to sit in a little bit today and moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up people with disabilities and the civil rights movement. I make no mistake about it. We all sit here in whatever role we have within the service system in our organizations on a platform of social justice. Day in and day out, our call is to create the conditions for someone to succeed with basic human rights, and people with disabilities have had to fight for those basic human rights for decades and decades, centuries really. So we wanted to start with, while we're talking about where we stand, we want to start with, there we go. We stand on a foundation of things, of people, of thinkers, of researchers who have come before us. So I wanted to just briefly kind of get us up to the 5 odd experiences with a little bit of a lineage of where these thoughts came from. So Wolfensberger, in a very, very small little nutshell, provides us with an awareness of where people with disabilities start. And where people with disabilities start in our society is a place of being devalued by the greater whole. By very nature of being born with a disability, human beings are devalued by society. We can't possibly move forward in hopes of shifting that without knowing that that's the case, right? It's the same as the movement right now in our country around Black Lives Matter. You can't move forward until everyone understands that the foundation is institutional racism and structural violence, right? So the same for people with disabilities. You're born into a life of being devalued. Wolfensberger talks about normalization. Normalization principle means making available to all people with disabilities patterns of life and conditions of everyday living which are as close as possible to the regular circumstances and ways of life of society. So this is the answer to, or the call to, how do we start to work our way away from the devaluing of people. I've got to get used to my arrows don't work and I've got to hit the mouse. In 1983, he cemented his theory, social role valorization. In this analysis of human relationships and human services, his theory brings to light the idea that society tends to determine people to be of less value. We've just been talking about that, based off of a label of disability. So what we're trying to do is get to a position where we're finding valued social roles for people, right? You can't find a valued social role in places that are not ordinary, that are not seen by the greater whole of society as normal. What this can do is create psychological isolation. And Brene Brown writes in her Daring Greatly from Jean Baker Miller and Irene Stiver, we believe that the most terrifying and destructive feeling that a person can experience is psychological isolation. This is not the same as being alone. It is a feeling that one is locked out of the possibility of human connection and of being powerless to change the situation. In the extreme, psychological isolation can lead to a sense of hopelessness and desperation. People will do almost anything to escape this combination of condemned isolation and powerlessness. Mentioned it in the meditation this morning, and very well intended. A lot of times the service system can be a party to this happening to people. We can surround people with programs and services that are in community, but they're not with it. So this feeling of hopelessness and despair and loneliness. So there's a difference between being alone. I oftentimes like to be alone, but the feeling of loneliness can have this energy of despair and isolation. Like I'm surrounded by people, but I have no connection to them because I don't find value in my life. So what we're leading up to is what John O'Brien and Connie Lyle O'Brien were able to create from years and years of study under Wolfensberger. So there's a sports metaphor, you talk about coaches and there's a coaching tree and there's a coach that comes from this coach, he coached under him. So John spent a long time studying Wolfensberger, and from that came the 5 valued experiences and accomplishments that are going to basically frame the rest of what we're talking about today. One of John's gifts, what I really appreciate about John, is that he's able to take information, theory, and research and make it tangible for people who might not be as smart as John. He's very, very good at that, and it's super helpful and super useful. And so this image that we're going to see around the experiences and accomplishments was born from the teachings of Wolfensberger, as well as a bunch of other people that John and Connie are going to share with us right now with this video. We're going to hear from them.
The thinking, language, and practice of a person-centered approach to supporting people with disabilities emerged in the 1970s, along with the process of deinstitutionalization. 40 years later, we face great challenges in our efforts to remain faithful to the intent and spirit of work that honors the citizenship of all and builds a beloved community that works for everyone. And so we gathered to reflect on influences, actions, and learnings that have emerged through lifetimes of commitment to a just world that is built upon the contributions of all.
We benefited a lot, I think, from learning about PASS and using it and applying it to deep conversations about what was not working in programs. But then John and I started thinking, well, that's good about what's not working and what do we not want, but what do we want? What kinds of things are we trying to work for, not just what are we trying to work against? That's what led us to start thinking in some other ways and led us to the 5 accomplishments and the 5 valued experiences.
Normalization, as Wolfensberger was writing about it, gave us some headings, but they didn't really work very well for us. So we began to think about what are some of the things that it's fair to say apply regardless of disability, and that indicate the kinds of experiences that go with a good life. Because there's so much variation among us in what we think a good life would look like that we need to sort of think a little bit more about, are there any things that'll at least work for guidance? Are there any things that if we don't intentionally attend to them, won't happen for people who are receiving services for people with disabilities, except by accident, right? So what's likely to happen? People are likely to have small and homogeneous social networks. People are not likely to belong without intentional effort. People are not likely to be able to exercise autonomy, to be in charge of their lives. The sort of default position that we're for socially is to put them, not us, but them, under supervision, under control. And so we began to try to think about as the us and them, with them being the undesirables, belonging at the edge or outside of our community. As we thought about what are some common experiences that we have a say about in the service world. There are lots of things that we thought aren't our business, aren't the service system's business. People's religion and spirituality, for example. It's a vital dimension of people's lives. We don't think it's our business to create the conditions under which people can pursue spiritual growth and development. It's not our business to sort of make that into something we want to do. And about that time, we ran across a thinker called Thomas Gilbert, who was a student of B.F. Skinner's, and tried to apply Skinner's ideas about applied behavior analysis to industry. One of the things that he came to as an insight was that it was critically important to identify what human activity was trying to accomplish. And so he defined quality in terms of accomplishment, and he defined accomplishment in terms of valued experiences. So we've got Eric Tristan telling us that we need to find ideals and we need to look for dimensions of human experience that we never get finished with. So we never get too good at choosing. never get too good at deepening our belonging, our citizenship. We never get too good at sharing the places and the activities and the rituals of community life in a skillful and satisfying way. We never get too good at developing our capacity to bring our distinctive gifts to other people. We can't finish fulfilling the valued social role of citizen. We end up with these 5 kind of valued experiences that let us apply Thomas Gilbert's idea and say, these are the things that we're trying to accomplish. We want to support the experience of belonging. And that's not going to happen if people don't actively and intentionally participate in community life. We want to support people's growth in their capacity and their opportunity to choose. That means that we have to figure out what the conditions for this person are that allow them to develop and to exercise their autonomy. We want people to bring their gifts. So that leads us to say, how can we help people to develop their competency, their signature strengths? That's kind of the basic idea. And because we had been working for a number of years with discovering ways to take rather quick snapshots.
Oh, shit. Sorry. We're back-ish
Their
where
signature
we were.
strengths. That's kind of the basic idea. And because we had been working for a number of years with discovering ways to take rather quick snapshots of how people's lives, how people's everyday lives were going, we already had a number of simple kinds of processes for looking at people's everyday life. And those kind of lined themselves up pretty well with the accomplishments. It didn't take a lot of work to begin to say, these are good questions to ask. These are worthwhile things to look at in people's lives. And that kind of created windows. Each valued experience becomes like a window on people's experience. And it also becomes a container for shaping intention, which is what person-centered planning is about, shaping collective intention around what a particular person finds meaningful and valuable in composing a life that they and the people who love them find worth living.
Okay. There's so much in that piece from John and Connie. Laura mentioned some names at the beginning of the session today. John O'Brien, Connie Lyle O'Brien, Judith Snow, Hans Meisner. I mean, there are names of people, if you don't know who they are or you're not familiar with them, that you should write down. At minimum, we encourage you to get onto the interwebs and look up John O'Brien if you're not familiar with him. We affectionately refer to him as Yoda. For people who don't know who John is, it's easy to connect with people, the gravity of his work, with a Star Wars analogy. And I know there's some outliers out there who aren't down with Star Wars, that's fine. But Yoda is pretty universal.
Whatever.
So that's who we're talking about. So here's the image. And the other thing is that's great with John's able to put things into imagery and visuals for people who learn better that way. He mentioned at one point in that piece that what we're after is for citizenship for all people. So that image in the middle represents to me citizenship and membership. That's the pinnacle. That is our North Star. And it is an image of a star that we're looking at. So this is our compass. It is our North Star. It is what it's been around for over 40 years. So I can imagine how frustrating it might be that here we find ourselves in a system that doesn't serve people all that well still, when this thing's been around for over 40 years, and it is absolutely still valid right now. So I'm going to walk us through it one more time to orient ourselves to it. And then we're going to share a couple of stories that kind of add color to this framework. So at the top, you've got belonging. It's a huge part of feeling like you're valued, is that you feel like you have a sense of belonging to something greater than yourself. We can't get there unless we're actually actively participating in our community, that there's visibility. And it's not just being out in the community, it's being in the community with intention, with purpose, not an outing. Just to get rid of that word. That's one of the non-essentials. It's not, I don't go on outings. I don't go on drives in a van to kill 2 hours because I just need to get through my shift. That's dehumanizing. We need to be in the community, participating in things of purpose and of value to us. That is going to be how we try to get to belonging. Being respected. In order to be respected, you've got to have a valued social role. And what we mean by that is a role in the community, in your neighborhood, that people see as having value. I'm not sure about you, but when I visit a big, giant congregate day center for people with disabilities, I don't see value. Again, dehumanizing. Valued, being respected, is having a job at the YMCA where people expect you to be there. Being valued, being respected means that you have a role as a teacher in a class, as an assistant. These are just some examples of valued social roles, and as a means to being respected. Speaking of the big congregate day centers, that would not be an ordinary place. It's a big building and community, but it's pretty much precluded and segregated off from connecting with the community at large. So what we mean by sharing ordinary places means that you have to, again, have a community presence. So if you live, I'll just use Ocean Beach because we live here in San Diego. If I'm a community member who lives in Ocean Beach, there is a fantastic farmers market that happens once a week. It's a vibrant, thriving farmers market. If I go there every single time it happens to get my produce, to listen to the live music, to connect with those around me, I begin to have visibility. I begin to be noticed by those around me as a citizen who lives in that community. That's an ordinary place. Churches are ordinary places. Gyms are ordinary places. Contributing. Contribution could be the most important part of feeling valued. Do we have a place to actually give our gifts, to express our gifts, to contribute to the community? In order for us to be able to do that, we need to have an understanding of competencies. And a lot of that can come out through discovery processes, person-centered planning processes, and quite frankly, just spending time with people, spending enough time with people to get to know who they are as a human being. That's one of the biggest things we get lost. We're so busy in the service system, running around from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, that we're not spending enough time just sitting with the human beings that we are quote unquote serving. It's incredibly important. And then of course, the final one here, as we come around the clock, is choice, choosing. And we got to get to a place where we have an understanding of the person that we're working with. What is their sense of their own autonomy? These are really great things. And I love how John explains these as windows. In the context of the service system and the regulations and having to write things into measurable goals, and you see the most ridiculous goals, like Beth likes to share one where, Josh will cross the street 9 out of 10 times safely. That 10th time sucks. Damn.
It really does.
I don't know. I mean, that's probably a special incident report.
I'm not sending them to work that day. I mean, I'm just not going to do it.
These are the things we've been doing to people. Whereas if we took a step back and we looked through these windows, would we be able to measure in a more heartfelt way? Where is this person finding belonging in their life? Where are they being respected? And if you can't answer these questions with anything ironclad, we're off course. And we need to come back to this and figure out how can we connect this person into their community. My favorite is sharing ordinary places, because it's not rocket science. You live in a neighborhood and you find an ordinary place and you start to share it with other citizens who live there. This is when normally I would say,
I think the key is that none of this is rocket science. I think we outthink ourselves. We make this way more difficult than it really needs to be. I think, you know, trying to figure out what people like might be really, really challenging for some people that have communication challenges. But, you know, I think we've clinicalized it, and we've made it more about creating systems around people and less around just spending time with people and figuring it out the old fashioned way, you know, so it really isn't rocket science. It really is about relationship.
so normally I would say, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? But we're on a webinar and I can't hear anybody, so we're just going to move on. Okay?
So there's
Just a
that.
reminder that you can put questions in the, and we're hoping to have time at the end to get to a couple of them.
Yep.
Okay, now we have another video, and this is, Beth, you want to tee this video up real quick?
So this is my spirit animal, Beth Mount, and she's going to give us a really condensed, easy to understand difference between what it means to be system-centered and what it means to be person-centered, and just in a really lovely way.
Yes, and this is born out of, again, if you think about the lineage, this is like another, what we're about to do with the video in the
Beth Mount
next
spends
one.
a lot of time partnering with John O'Brien, and those two, they have a lot of work that they've done together, a lot of publishing that they've done together. So when you're looking up John O'Brien, you probably will run across Beth Mount almost always.
From the origin of person-centered planning, we were trying to understand and see what it looks like when we just fit people into systems and defined their needs and saw them through the eyes of what a system needs for a person to be in order to generate the funding that's required and to basically service them. And system-centered work tends to be based on a medical model, which assumes something's wrong with people, and it's the system's job to fix them. And so the system is invested in defining them in terms of their deficiencies and creating a treatment plan, and then working to help people get it right before they get to be members and be whole people in the real world. So person-centered planning offers a major contrast to that, which is to say that people don't belong to systems. They belong to themselves, they belong to their families and their communities. And if we see them in a different light by the capacities that they bring, and we understand that their communities are the place where they can contribute and be citizens, then our thinking shifts dramatically from how to fit people into systems and service them there to how do we support people to live good lives in community, and then how do we take what we need from systems and services so that services are not bad, they just tend to be wired for their own self-interest. So a good person-centered planning process calls into question the way we use services and invites us to really change the way most of our services are configured to be more responsive to the people and the way that they want to live in the communities that they're in.
Contact us for more information.
So, you know, one of the things that she said was that services aren't bad. They're just hardwired to kind of perpetuate themselves. You know, what we're going to be partially talking about today is also talking about how that happens and how things like perpetuating themselves, how we create services that are designed to create the funding that support those people. And in order to create the funding, we have to create, label the disability. We have to make it seem like the person is needy at all times. And if that need goes away, then the need for our services doesn't seem necessary, right? Well, what really has happened is that the need has seemed like it's gone away, but only because the support has been so great. So it's kind of like we need to figure out how to analyze that better and how to make supports, how to support somebody without make it look like their collateral packet is making them sound like they're needier than they are. We need to recreate how we do systems. It's just, and this is one way to do it. So what more is possible is a framework that we have been using for the last, 6 or 7 years, maybe even longer. Basically, it starts in the middle at the end of the red circle where it says "Ask more of myself," and it ends where the star is. The star is what we consider to be membership, but we start at the beginning where we really take a look at what is it that I can ask more of myself. What part do I play in this? What can I do differently about how I'm looking at this service? And it goes all the way through the service system. After I'm going to look at what I can do more, I'm going to ask more of services. Sometimes you're going to ask more of services and services are going to say, yeah, I got nothing. But sometimes if you ask more, you can get more. We're gonna reveal capacities from the person. You're going to reveal capacities from the service system. You're going to reveal capacities from yourself, and just keep going around the circle. You're going to keep going. Services don't stop just because you unveil something that's great about that person. Around each cycle, you get to another star where it's the service, the support is better. You land someplace and it's like, wow, this guy's doing a lot better. Do you stop right there? You don't stop right there. You keep going. You keep asking more. What more is possible for this person? What more is possible? Do you wait until the annual to keep planning for this person? You don't wait for the annual. You just keep doing it. You keep asking. Curiosity is where is landed right here in this what more is possible. I think the part about the human spirit that is lacking in our field right now desperately is curiosity. So I implore you guys to really take a look at what part of you is curious about people. Ask more questions, ask more of self, ask more of community. What we're looking for in the community is allies and people that we can partner with, people that can be unpaid partners, alliances. Ask more of services again. Explore community places together. Do some community mapping. Look at community in a way that you never have before, not just the way that has been done every time that they've done it. So, really take a look from other people's perspective of what that community looks like. Support connection and contribution. When you get to contribution, figure out what is it that person can contribute to their community and go for it. Again, you're going to circle around, keep asking what more is possible. Sometimes it takes a really, really, really long time for somebody to get to membership. And even if they get to membership in one place, they might not feel membership in all places. So this is a spiral that takes a very, very, very long time. So, I mean, the point of it is that you never stop asking, you never stop making alliances. You might have alliances in one part of somebody's life, in another part of their life, there isn't any. And people's lives change. Things like pandemics happen. I mean, things like somebody loses a job, something like somebody loses a partner, sometimes families fall apart, and then you have to start all over again. But this is a spiral that kind of consistently asks people to take a look at, for the first time, I think, what part do you play in this? So it doesn't allow people to kind of get lazy and blame. it really has people take a look at what part are you doing about this, and you're not going to, it doesn't allow people to let themselves off the hook. So anything to add to that, Kirk?
Yeah, I would just say that in our experience when we've been working with this framework with organizations all over, that most of us do find ourselves at better support. That's really good news. People are doing really good supports for folks in whatever container they find themselves in. The stifling part for human beings and their ability to evolve into becoming a member is that we're complacent at better support. So that is what this framework calls us to do, is to not be complacent. I'm not complacent in my own life. I ask our people all the time to think about the 8 hours you just spent with somebody and to actually step into the shoes of the person you supported and ask yourself, was that day good enough for me? And if it wasn't, then we're off course. People with disabilities aren't asking for anything other than to live a real life, like all of us have the right to live. No, the arrow doesn't work, Kirk. Okay, storytelling time. So this is Nick. That's him standing in front of his path. This was probably close to 10 years ago. I think that for me, the Norman Kuntz quote or question that he asks, I'm butchering this quote. I just had it. I practiced it this morning. When does our desire to help those we see as less fortunate obscure the possibility of learning together as equals? I think that's a very important question to ask. I think, again, people are very well intended, and we've got our social work degrees, and we're gonna go fix people, and I'm gonna look at you from a system-centered lens. That question begs us to pause and say, I'm actually gonna share space and time with this human being in a reciprocal learning kind of framework. I can learn as much from Nick, and I have, that he can learn from me. So I wanted to share a project we did together around this idea of learning together as equals. So Nick's an artist. Nick is a deep thinker. He thinks philosophically. I think philosophically, and so we can have these really long, drawn-out conversations for hours, and not come to any resolution. But we've talked about some important things to us. That image on the right that you see that says "Bring people to the light." Nick's very spiritual. He's a practicing Buddhist. He once on a walk on the beach pointed that reflection of the sun as it's going down over the ocean. And he said what that means to him is lightfulness. And he refers to light in the context of that he has light and dark thoughts all the time. He's very wide open about the loss he's had in his life. He lost his mother at an early age. He's got all sorts of his own demons, he calls them. But his goal is to lean into the lighter side of things as much as possible. So we decided to embark on a 2-year project that we called the Lightfulness Project, where we went and harvested. I also take photos here and there. And we decided to just go around and harvest urban art, so art in the community. Another thing that Nick is really into, you saw in the previous slide, him actually embodying that peaceful warrior pose. He really connects with expressing himself through for body movements and gestures. We did a Liberty Plan a year ago in our office, and he's sprawled out across the table. He's on the floor. He's trying to express what he wants for his life in movement. So we went around, and we would find a piece of art, and he would do some sort of movement. So this is spirals, and we made it into a coffee table book. So after we got the photos, we would come back and we would talk about what the art meant to us, and we put it into a coffee table book. Not for sale, it wasn't anything we did to make any money. We spent money on it. It was just something we could do together, that we could create together as an expression of our relationship with one another and the way we show up in the world. I think Nick said this in our little blurb in the coffee table book, that sometimes the art's being obscured or blocked by things that aren't that beautiful. This is Nick sharing his Liberty Plan at a local workshop we hosted back in the fall. might have been the winter. I don't remember. I don't even know what day it is.
It's
But
Blur's Day.
he came with this. It's a 3-day workshop, and he brought this. He took it off of his wall in his room and brought it to the group. I think this is important because Nick felt safe and comfortable to be able to share this with strangers, people he had just met the previous day. And on his own accord, he brought this, and he wanted to show people what it looks like when you're given a platform to speak your truth. These person-centered planning processes are platforms for people to speak what they need and what they want and what they desire in their life. And so Nick wanted to share that. He's very, very connected to that process. We have this image here just to say that, you know, it's not all puppy dogs and roses, right? People struggle. We go up and down with people. We commit to partnering people through the highs and lows of their life. Nick went through a patch of about 2 years where it was a dark time. He had things happen. He was losing jobs, volunteer jobs that he had due to, you know, inappropriate behavior. He was going to school at the time and got confused on a journaling assignment. And Nick is heavily involved with therapy, heavily involved in the journaling as a practice, and knows that stuff is confidential. It got kind of twisted into a homework assignment. He turned something in that was written about the teacher that again was deemed to be inappropriate, and they felt unsafe, and he got kicked out of college. So, and he just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. But his team rallied, and because they have really close relationships with Nick, they didn't see it as a fixing. They just sat with him in that darkness. They sat with him, listened to him, and worked through it with him. So we kind of embraced the struggle, right, as a teaching tool, relate our own struggles in our own lives, because that's just seems to be effective, right? We're working with human beings. We're not working with UCI numbers. These are human beings. So he struggled, but he persevered, and he sort of righted his ship and leaned into his practice of meditation, of his Buddhist practice, his men's group he's involved with, and kind of pulled himself out. And so much so that he was told he could never come back to school, and he advocated for himself and went to a couple of meetings, and the dean admitted him back in. So this is Nick about, I think this is in January, at Miracosta College, a local junior college. Junior college is an ordinary place, people. That is an ordinary place. So he's already in one of the points of the 5-out experiences. Nick is at an ordinary place. This is his induction into the Associated Student Government. Nick is the first student ever with a developmental disability at Miracosta College to serve on the Associated Student Government Board. So he's blazing a trail. This is a video that you won't hear, so I'm not going to show it. It's poor quality. Nick has adapted, like the rest of us, to doing Zooms. So this is him on a Zoom call for the Associated Student Government. And then this next clip, I think, just brings the entirety of the 5-out experiences together. So I want to show this to you guys.
That's Christina. Hi, Nicholas.
Hi, Christina.
I want to thank you so much for being a wonderful and great leader. You just took charge and you led in making the video for Spartan Experience to show how we can get connected during the virus that's going on. And I appreciate all of your hard work. The video turned out amazing. And I want to encourage you to keep going in ASG. I hope you really join next year as well. I love your bright enthusiasm. You have an amazing work ethic. And one thing I love about you is you always ask insightful questions, and you just brighten everyone's day. And in the meetings, you always were there to lend a helping hand. And I just really want to thank you. You are so amazing.
I am so happy, and also being a celebration of life, and I hope that everyone here to go and have fun in life. And I love to continue for the ASG, guys.
Christina, do you want to share what was talked about during Senate today? Oh, for
About Nicholas?
yes. For me and Nicole.
For Jose, there was some news shared during your Senate today.
Oh, Nicholas, you are the Senator of the Month, awarded Senator of the Month for the month of April. Student at Large of the Month. So thank you for your contribution to our team. And we just wanted to, the Student Senate awarded you the Student at Large of the Month award for the month of April because of your contribution, for your leadership, and especially in the public relations and the video that you created with the team. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I appreciate and I hope that we can continue growing and being success.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. I love what you said about that and about continuing the work. And you've been an amazing contributor so far on ASG as well. We appreciate you so much.
Correct.
Our next person, I think that's Chris.
So in that one short video, you even hear some of the 5 out experiences. He's awarded Student at Large for his contribution to that campus. He's at a campus, a college campus, which is an ordinary place. He's on the Associated Student Government, so that is absolutely a place where he feels respected. We talked about contribution, and he made the choice, the 5th experience, to go back to college, the college that kicked him out. So he went from being kicked out of college to being the first ever person with a developmental disability to sit on the Associated Student Government. That is a valued social role, right? That is a valued social role. That is exactly the intention, looking at people's lives with the experiences in mind. He's got a valued role there. This is Alex. This is one of his support workers. I like this because it shows that they actually have a meaningful relationship with one another. It turns out that they actually like each other. They have fun with one another, and they learn from one another. In fact, Alex is much younger than Nick, so I think he looks up to Nick in many ways. This picture is beautiful. This is another picture of one of Nick's support workers at a medical appointment, and they're holding hands because he needs that sort of support in that moment because it's a stressful situation. I think it's important to notice that it is important for people to have meaningful relationships with those that are around them who show up as support workers with the hope that we can work through all of the ups and downs that life presents to us and just go ahead and sit in it when it's not going well and celebrate it when it's going really well. So Nick's story right now, he's operating on another level. I'm blown away by him, and he is certainly a teacher for all of us. So I think that might be it for Nick's story. Oh, no, one more thing, and I can't see the quote. So this is a Brene Brown quote that talks about connection is the energy that is created between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment. Belonging is the innate human desire to be a part of something larger than us. And Nick is in many, many ways, in many different communities, a part of something larger than himself. Now we're going to kick it over to this guy. Whoa.
Whoa. All right. I'd like you to meet James. James is this actually isn't James. The next slide actually is James. That's James. That's the James that I met about, I'm going to say probably 11 years ago, maybe. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is kind of what I was saying earlier right after we saw the video that Beth did, is around the collateral damage that we do to people. The collateral packet that I got on James was disturbing. And typically in situations when we get collateral packets, and the collateral packet is the thing that they send you when you get a referral for any program, and it's the stuff that comes that talks about who James is, that is his history, right? And James is actually sitting on this webinar with his mom. Hi, James. And it tells about who he was. And usually it's stuff that in my opinion, is not all that helpful, because it's usually like a, test from when James was like 3, and he wasn't 3 when I met him. He was in his 20s, and it's, a social report from when he was in elementary school. And it's like, it just doesn't give a really good idea. And it also identifies all the things that create the reason why he's a regional center, why he's eligible for services. So it doesn't talk about who James is as a person, which is the part that now we know on the other side of that. But at the time, if all I knew was reading the collateral packet, it was like, wow, okay. But I didn't read the collateral packet. Kirk and I actually went to James's house, and it's pretty awesome. But in the collateral packet, this is what we found out. So he has Down syndrome. He's got a significant intellectual delay, 63 IQ, has a significant speech impediment, a stutter that has shut down his ability and desire to communicate verbally. He's socially immature, cannot self-direct, heavily reliant on his parents, needs 24-hour care. Volunteer work would be highly recommended. So this is a fast forward of James. That's probably a little while ago. But so we met James in the summer of 2011. We began planning immediately. And so James moved into his own home in January of 2012. He moved in with his girlfriend, who he had already been with for 5 years. So that didn't say anything in his packet, right? Initially, they both received 24/7 support in their own apartment. He had an open DR case at that time, and the agency had been looking for work for him for quite a while. And he had also had a large group of friends that he had already hung out with, primarily kids that he had known from an early play group from the Down Syndrome Association of San Diego from when he was little. And other people had joined that too, but these are people that he had known, I think, since birth. So long-term friendships. So James's team continued to gel, and some of the team members stayed with him for years and years, and create opportunities for and with him. We continued to do planning and figuring out what James wanted. We continued to ask what more is possible, constantly. In 2014, James had a Liberty Plan. What he focused on then was primarily on improving his cooking and party hosting skills, getting a job, his relationship with Kristen, and having fun with his friends. And a lot of it was about his relationship and getting a job. Those were the two primary things that he wanted to work on. So as we move forward with that plan, the question is, how did that plan shift his life? So one was that we really focused on safety so that they could spend more time alone without 24-hour support. There was a lot of focus on like how to get out of the apartment if a fire happened. And it did end up allowing them to spend more time alone, 2 nights alone overnight and 30 hours per week and stuff. So they were able to have less and less time with support staff with them all the time. So over time, allowed that to happen. Over the next few years, he landed a couple of really good jobs. He worked at a smoothie company. He worked at Robex for a couple of years, but he worked behind the scenes. So he worked before the smoothie company opened, and he worked primarily unloading trucks and putting the fruit away and stuff like that. So he was part of the smoothie company, but he didn't really interact with customers. So it was a really good learning job. His boss was great, but it was limited. Like he only had a couple of tasks, and it was very small amount of hours. It was a really good step in the door. His boss was really good to him, but it just didn't fill him up. It wasn't like it just wasn't filling him up. So he left there. He worked at Walmart as a cart assistant. And again, like Walmart just didn't fill him up because it was a huge conglomerate. And Walmart just didn't, he was one of, 150,000 employees there. And they changed his schedule all the time. And James didn't have the consistency that he needed. Aside from, he also had a knee injury, which kind of hampered him a little bit, but it just wasn't really, he didn't really ever feel a part of that total team because it was so big and it didn't fill him up all the way. So the other thing that came out of that plan was that he started having regular dude nights, which is something really important to James. He started introducing, like he would rent the WWE, whatever it's called. I don't get it, but James does. And he would have all of his dude friends over to watch that about every 3 or 4 months, maybe once a quarter or something like that. Started doing Zumba and joined a gym and played racquetball with one of his team members and joined Weight Watchers and lost a bunch of weight, got healthy. The other thing is that we really focused on encouraging James to use his speech more around his team members in his team meetings, getting comfortable with answering questions and just talking more and using texting so that it would give him more confidence. And James talks all the time now. So it's not that he was reliant on his parents, it's that he just didn't have the confidence to speak. And he was around his parents a lot so that he needed them to speak for him. He doesn't need that anymore. He does have a great relationship with his parents, but he doesn't need that anymore. Oh, June just said James is not at this webinar. It's just June, got it. So we continued asking, James's life kept getting better and better and better, and he kept getting more and more independent and learning more things and learning how to cook, and just all this stuff kept emerging. We didn't stop planning for him. We just kept going. And then more stuff happened. We kept prototyping and learning. That's Kristen, his girlfriend. We kept having more and more team meetings and planning as a team. We kept community mapping and figuring out what was going on in his community that we didn't know of and looking at it from different angles, and kept looking at just being more curious and stuff. Then James and Kristen got married in September of 2018. They had a really cool wedding that they planned. That's James and his huge group of dudes. Him and Kristen, after the wedding, their dance, their wedding was pretty spectacular. I can't remember how many people were there, but it was pretty big. So they were pretty stoked. So everything is kind of falling into place. Everything is like kind of a fairy tale, right? I mean, they go to Disneyland afterwards, cutest hats ever. But James doesn't have a job, right? So James is working, he's not fulfilled. And it's still not the fairy tale. He is super happy with Kristen, lives in a great apartment, has tons of friends, but he's not feeling like he's contributing. So it's not done, right? So I went to a team meeting, and what I intended to do was kind of try really hard to figure out a way to get his team kind of jump-started. I didn't intend to jumpstart James, but this is what ended up happening. But I wanted to show them this video to try to get them jump-started to really start looking for a job for James. So I showed them this video, which is a video from a colleague of ours in Cincinnati, that it's Starfire. They have they run a program there, and they're amazing, and they do individualized support for people. And so anyway, watch this video. This is what I showed at a team meeting. Can't hear it.
I think it's because I was muted. Hold on, let me try to start it over.
There isn't like a one size fits all. Starfire's mission for Michael was to connect him to brewers. That's not our mission for anybody else. And I think that is uniquely difficult and complicated and also incredibly real. Kenny and Brady saw that he added something different as an employee, and he loves beer, which I think is a requirement to work here. Any of us at Starfire know what the alternate option is for other people with disabilities. And Michael, he has something uniquely his own and beautiful. He has a life. Michael was at one of the grand openings as a family and friend. That's amazing. I could not have imagined that in 2013 that Michael would be here as a VIP. He was expected to be here. There was a seat at the table for him. At the end of the night, Lana, Michael's mom, said, "You helped do this." Michael's life is vastly different because of his involvement with Matry. But I think as much as it is about Michael and supporting Michael and helping him find a role, it's about all of us. How do I get involved in a story that's unique and different? And how does that impact Cincinnati in a really positive way? So Starfire is kind of this invisible thread that weaves this together, and oftentimes people don't even know. That's what Starfire's story is as well. It's kind of secret, behind the scenes, intentional, slow work.
So James saw that video, and when he saw Michael in the video, what he saw was a guy who looked just like him. And he got really pumped. And in that meeting, he said, "I want to work at Matry," not knowing that that was like, 2,500 miles away. But that gave us an instigation to realize that James wanted to work at a brewery, and he wanted to feel like Michael does. And so, San Diego is like the hotspot for breweries. There's only 7 million of them on every street in San Diego. So that didn't seem hard at all. So the map that I showed you earlier, we made a map of breweries in and around his place that they could get to fairly simply for work. And we checked them off as we go. So this place, My Yard Live, used to be a soup plantation or something like that. It was, what?
I think it was a hometown buffet.
Oh, hometown buffet, that's right. Anyway, oops, sorry. And so it was in the newspaper that it was, had been bought, and that the owners were turning it into a place that was a bar and a restaurant, and it was all about community and live music and that bringing people together and people's, breaking bread and that kind of thing. And so June decided to write the owners a letter about her son, and they didn't answer, and we didn't hear anything. And then lo and behold, right before the hiring was going to happen, she got a letter back saying, from one of the owners saying, "Hey, we'd love to meet your son, blah, 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 blah." And one thing led to another, and I brought James to the interview process, and they basically hired him on the spot. And this place is just an incredible, it's almost like we're speaking the same language. This is the first day of training. It's like nobody ever looked at James like he was different. They embraced him like it just didn't even occur to them not to. He started working on before the first, I guess it was a year ago this month. He does some of their Instagram posts. He's just part of the team. As a result, he became, he made a choice to work there. He's fully respected. They see him as a contributing member of that team, and they can't imagine not having him there. It's an ordinary place. He loves it. The owner, one of the owners, is the son of the guy who brought Special Olympics to Connecticut. And that's the ally that we're looking for. You can keep looking at places like Walmart and all that, but when you can find an ally who has the heart, the social heart, that is somebody that can look at James and say, "You matter," that's what you're looking for. June just happened to write this guy a letter, and he bought it. I mean, he loves James. And so, you know, because of COVID, they had to close, but they didn't close for good. They actually reopened not very long ago, a couple weeks ago. And so right now we're in the process of reconceiving James's role. First of all, so James had his 30th birthday there. We had no idea. So this is his 30th birthday party. They created this sweatshirt. This isn't something that they actually sell. They made a sweatshirt from scratch just for James. And then go to the next slide, I think it is. Go to the next slide. So this card is signed by like 23 coworkers that were not there that day. So that had to have taken at least 3 days or 4 days for them to create, because not all those people were there. So you know how, I mean, no offense, Kirk, but when we do birthday cards for people in the office, we do it like, oh my God, Kirk's going to be here in like 5 minutes, sign this, you know, under the table type of thing.
Right.
But these people had to pre-plan and know that it was James's birthday before we got there. For 23 people to sign that birthday card, that meant something big. They had a birthday cake. Everybody came in and wished him happy birthday. I mean, it was just a big deal. And so they keep, you know, James keeps in touch with them via Facebook Live right now during COVID. And just the other day, you know, they keep emailing him, and just the other day, James went in there for dinner and to see what's going on and stuff. And so he's going to continue working there. Just we're trying to figure out when that's going to happen. So he is still part of that team, even though they're in the process of changing and what is James's, you know, role they're going to be. So COVID changes everything, but just because it closed down doesn't mean that James's role there stops. You know, so, you know, I think that James feels like he is a part of My Yard Live and that team there, and he just feels like they want him back and that he is part of that, and there's no way that doesn't feel good. I mean, he's all about it. So all of, you know, the 5 valued experiences are all wrapped right in there. What we're saying is that it doesn't seem like this can be done in gigantic groups. This is literally something that needs to be kind of picked apart and done one person at a time. If what we're talking about can affect a person at a time, then I think we've been successful. I mean, I think we need to slow down and look at things and see how we're affecting the process. So, and where do I stand? What are we doing in order to affect change? What are we doing to make this different? What are we doing about the service system? What are we doing about the stuff that we're providing for people? I encourage people to take a look at what we are currently doing, what we have been doing up until this point, and really trying to take a yes and approach versus well, we can't really do that because, you know, that kind of thing. Let's not get in our own way. Let's think outside of the box.
I think another incredibly important component of that storytelling is storytelling. So in the story that Beth just told about James, the igniter was him seeing a story about somebody who was a member of a community that he really wanted to be a member of, right? He saw the docu clip of Michael at Madtree and it connected. It's really, really nice to talk about theory and frameworks, but they are just theory and frameworks unless you practically apply them, which is why we tell the stories of it. So the first step is to get to stillness and really think about, where is it that do I stand? Where do I stand in this work? Take some time to reflect about that. It's not jump to action, it's reflect. Can we let go of the non-essential stuff that we've identified during this COVID? Can we let go of doing things because that's the way they've always been done? Okay, I for sure, as an individual in this work, commit to not doing things that are a waste of time, that there's so much that people can be doing other than being in senseless meetings to plan a meeting. We need to slow down and just spend time with people, right? That's the first step. Spend time with yourself, spend time with those around us, and share the stories. So the first step is that we're bending the beam of observation back on us. I think oftentimes in this image, you see him looking up to the stars. For me, that sort of represents us looking at people with disabilities and how can we connect them in the community. I think the first thing we need to do is look at ourselves. You've got to be able to look at ourselves first. And are we on the right path? Are we on a path of doing right by people? That's the first and foremost. From the Theory U world and space, there's a quote that drives. We're not going to get into, but it's the quote is from Bill O'Brien, who's no longer with us. But the quote is, "The success of any intervention is entirely dependent on the interior condition of the intervener." I'll repeat that. The success of any intervention is entirely dependent on the interior condition of the intervener. So if my role in Nick's life is to be a supporter and an ally, I've got to be right and solidly grounded in the values of what I believe to be best for people to be a citizen, a contributive member of their community, before I can be at all effective in my support with Nick. Does that make sense? Everyone shaking their head? Good. Okay. Beth, this is you. You gotta unmute.
So as we meander through this, as we can get super frustrated, I get it. I mean, this system is complicated and bogged down and feels like we're in cog world, and there's just, we're running up against barriers and obstacles, and it is so complicated. Red tape, right? So as we look at this, I think we need to be really mindful that instead of just getting frustrated and looking at this like it's that and it's them and it's all of that murkiness, that what we actually do is remember that we are traffic. We are the system. We are in it. It's us. We're the ones that are doing this. It's not everybody else. We're actually it. So the stupid goals and stuff that I'm super frustrated with, I've done that. I've written stupid goals. I've written terrible goals about people. The programs and stuff that I'm really frustrated with, I've done that a million times. I am guilty of that for sure. So it's not that I think, that all of that is, just so broken. I am part of it, but I am willing to take a look at what part I play in that and just be really honest and vulnerable and say, I will do better. I absolutely will do better. And we take a look at the integrity gap. So the integrity gap is something that we identify as the space between what we say we stand for and what we actually do. Everybody's got one. Every single person has an integrity gap. And there's always at least a little bit of a gap. And if you can make it as small as you possibly can, that's the goal, right? So pay attention to how your actions reflect what you say you believe in. And how does your agency mind the gap? If you did notice a gap, what would you do about it? So
about the image, the metaphor of a gap, if we're not paying attention to that gap, people will slip through the cracks. We'll lose people. So we really do need to, I think all of us are very talented at saying the right thing. Are we doing it? Right? Are we stuck at better support and saying that we're doing the right thing? Or are we asking more?
I wonder if maybe the best thing that we could learn how to say is, I have no idea. Maybe the answer to what we need to say is, I have no idea what the answer is. Because the more we keep saying we know what the answer is, maybe we're saying the wrong answer. And we're not spending enough time asking the right questions. So sometimes the right answer is, I have no idea, but I'm willing to figure it out with you. So co-creation might be the right answer.
And that requires, like we've been talking about throughout today, slowing down and just spending time with people and being in that struggle together. That's absolutely where the magic can happen and where progress happens and where we evolve. So we like to use this idea of holding the tension also. People who can affect great change are people who are able to stand and hold the tension. And these two gentlemen were able to do that in a very profound and powerful way. This next guy, Parker Palmer, is an author, and I consider him to be a teacher. I study him. I've never met him, but you know, his writings are spot on. And he writes about Gandhi and King in one of his more recent books. And he refers to nonviolent change as the third way. And he says, now we understand a simple but significant truth. The third way is not a path of high heroism reserved for the likes of Gandhi and King. It is a path that can and must be walked by mortals like you and me. This is a call to action. This is a call for us to, it's okay to revere people who have come before us and laid the groundwork on how to affect change. But it's also our time to stand up and be a part of the change. It's our time to actually step into these shoes as people who really are change agents. And we're uniquely positioned in California. I mean, this is a California call. We have one of the most robust service systems and dedication to people with disabilities in the country. And it's our job to not mess that up. And it's okay. Somebody in the chat earlier said that this kind of thing is going to get pushback. Hell yeah, it's going to get pushback. It's going to get pushback that we're actually trying to change this system. The good news is we can just tell one story at a time, looking through these windows of the valued experiences and showing that it's not a measurable 9 out of 10 time thing. It's does that person feel like they are a member of their community? Does this person feel belonging? Do they have choice? Are they being respected? Are they sharing ordinary places? Are they contributing? These are the important questions. These are the ways that we need to be looking at how we are assessing if people are living real lives, real good lives.
These people have a lot to talk about. They just don't know it yet. In a minute, we'll show them that they have more in common than they think.
Hej alle sammen. Tak fordi I er kommet. Thomas, vil du stille dig der? Og Aske? Thomas, du bor med din familie i et dejligt hus på Vinkelhøj 8 i Viby. Før I flyttede ind, var det faktisk dit barndomshjem, Aske.
Det er rigtigt. Ja. Fodbold i haven om sommeren. Og kan I forestille mig? Præcis. Vi laver igen.
Mathilde, vil du komme herop? I to har faktisk stået over for hinanden før.
Okay.
Der var I 12 år. Og det var i en rugbykamp.
Okay, ja.
Kampen endte i øvrigt 42-0. Det er Askes hold.
Tak for kampen. Ja, tak.
Inger. Mathilde, den nat, du kom til verden for 27 år siden på Christiania, var Inger det første menneske, du så.
Var du min jordmor? Nå, fint. Kan du huske det?
Anna, i 2012 er din mand ude at løbe en tur. Pludselig falder han om med hjertestop. Heldigvis er der en, der reagerer hurtigt og redder ham. Knud, vil du komme herop?
just below the surface. A total stranger can turn out to be someone you're actually connected to. Someone who rouses forgotten memories, like the very first kiss. Someone who reminds you that you're not alone, but that somebody else also has a bulldog named Prebin. Someone like Thomas, who put out a fire at Vibeka's place.
Vi så taknemmelige for anmeldelsen kom så hurtigt.
Someone you've been gaming with for years, but
Kender I to hinanden?
have never met.
Altemann, mød Lil Salt.
Det er løgn. Du er topfraggeren. Jeg har fandme kendt hinanden i så 4 år, uden at nogensinde mødt hinanden og set hinanden før. Altså.
If we approach each other, we might find out that we share the same destiny.
Rana og Macha, I kom til Danmark fra Syrien for 4 år siden. Dorit og Jan, I har en lignende historie fra 2. verdenskrig.
Jeg har prøvet at være flygtig, og jeg vil aldrig glemme det. Det har betydet usigeligt meget.
Og Rikke, det var din oldefar, der risikerede sit liv ved at sejle Jan over Øresund den oktoberaften i 1943.
It's easy to mind your own business. It takes a little more effort to mind the community. But doesn't the feeling of having something in common, something that connects us, make it all worthwhile? TV2, all that we share.
So we show that video because we have been living in divisive times. And I feel very strongly that there's a shift happening in a very, very powerful way, and that things are going to change. And this community of people on this call that represent the state of California, no matter what your role or label is, whether it's state council, executive director at a regional center, service provider, teacher, student, self-advocate, parent, at the end of the day, when we drop those labels and roles, we are all of one humanity, and we are all working towards the same thing. We are trying to create a beloved community for everybody. And it's going to take all of us. We cannot do this alone. We have to stop running away from each other. We have to let go of stories and narratives about being divided over funding issues or regulations and just get back to basics, which is that we are all human beings that need one another to move forward in a positive way. And that might mean that we completely change everything we're used to about the service system that we know. But at the end of the day, if it's about getting to the point where everybody who's receiving services, quote unquote, is seen and valued and heard, then who gives a crap what it looks like? Who cares if we let go of all these non-essential things? If the end result is that we find valued roles for people, that's what we're after, that we're measuring through the windows of the 5 valued experiences.
So there are only 2 feelings, love and fear. There are only 2 languages, love and fear. There are only 2 activities, love and fear. There are only 2 motives, 2 procedures, 2 frameworks, 2 results, love and fear, love and fear. So it's time for us to choose one.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of our presentation. I don't know if there are questions or if there's time for questions or even what time of the day it is. So
my eyes are blurry because of that video. I almost cried, but I think it says 11:39 my clock. Thank you so much. Your presentation just brings us back to the work we're about. And before we answer any questions, I want to offer an invitation to all of you on this, who have joined our festival, that we all want to have another and we want you to be a part of it. We need the stories of people who have good lives. We need, now you don't have to have, not everyone needs to have a job in a bar. And we don't want to, we want stories of how people are belonging, how people are contributing, how they're connecting, how they have choices. And these don't have to be big, huge stories. They can be just little snippets. And we'd like to share a lot of them in an hour. And I need you to send your story to Mary Ellen Stives at the San Diego Office of the State Council, or to myself, or to any state council office near you. And you can find those email addresses if you just Google State Council on Developmental Disability. There's up at the top of their webpage that they list all 12 regional offices. And all of us are very committed to sharing stories so that we can help each other embrace individual lives, because it's what we have to do. People cannot go back to large congregate settings. They will die. No matter how often you wash down the tables, it's not the future. And so that's my invitation to you, is to share, and let's use this platform of Zoom to share throughout California, the nation, and even the world. We can have 1,000 people on at one time with this platform. So that's my invitation. So did you want to take some questions now?
Yeah, we're getting just a few. I'm looking, a lot of logistical questions like, will the presentation be sent out? I think we can at some point send it out in PDF format. And also I think the recording is going to be helpful for people. Mary Ellen answered that question to somebody. So we have to figure out how to make that work, but I don't know how that would even be distributed.
Well, we will have it posted hopefully soon. My last experience of recording a webinar, it came, I think, within an hour or two. So we can send it out to people that are on this call.
Great.
I did see one question, Kirk, that you might want to address, or Beth, whoever. Someone asked if person-centered planning could still be done with someone who was an adult that had a conservatorship.
Yeah.
My response would be, yes, try to engage the conservator if that's the best you can do, but go ahead and have a fling at that. You're the experts.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would be great to engage the conservator. This might seem controversial, but the powers of the conservatorship are not about planning. Planning is not, planning is just a part of what you do as your own service for somebody. And you've already been given the right to do services for people. So it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibilities that you are doing planning for somebody. So if somebody is in your, let's say, is in your day program, you should already be doing planning for somebody. I mean, that's part of what you're supposed to be doing already. So it's not something in addition to, it's what you should be doing already. So you shouldn't have to get special permission to do planning because it's what we're supposed to be doing. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not a system thing. It's how we do our services. It's how we get to know people. It's how we create what we're supposed to be moving forward with. So
it's a human planning for your life is human. We do
Mm-hmm.
person-centered plans on ourselves. I've had done. Beth's had 7 done. We do them for the organization. We do them for our direct support professionals. We believe in the power of person-centered planning for everyone to evolve and realize a life that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the system.
I mean, it has gotten very complicated and very bastardized up until now. So the individual support plan is part of the system, but that doesn't have anything to do with person-centered planning. So that's where the language has gotten confusing. So Jane Sharp just said person-centered planning is in the same lane of IPP. Yeah, that's where it's gotten very confusing. It never was intended to be part of the IPP. It can inform the IPP. So
It should inform the IPP.
it absolutely should inform the IPP. That is, it definitely should be doing that.
Not what I meant to type. She's not what I meant to type.
Oh.
While you're typing your new
Sorry,
thing.
Jane Sharp.
Somebody asked, I think that you meant COVID restrictions. Billy, you said it appears you expect COVID restrictions are going to be permanent. Is this correct? I don't think that's what we're saying. I think that what we're saying is COVID has given us time to pause and look at how are we going to do things differently.
Right.
At some
Can
point,
I add something there, Kirk?
Yes.
I think that was based off of what I said. I think the restrictions will be lifted and people are submitting plans to reopen all over the state with lots and lots of restrictions.
Okay.
But even if we didn't have COVID, we have the home and community-based services settings rule. You have to change. You have 2 years, but the time is now to make those changes. And you cannot bring people together in large congregate settings under those settings rules. People must be included in their community, contributing to their community, living a life that looks like yours and mine. Well, I hope people don't work as long hours I work, but people need to have a life that's rich. And the time is now to begin that planning. And that's what we want to help with. We want to share people's stories, share programs. A lot of programs have done some beautiful things, and we want to see them, and we want to share your work and your struggles and what didn't work. And I know when things don't work, you try again. So what was the effort you made next that made it successful?
Right. I think that is part of what needs to happen, is that the system is not very good at prototyping. They're not very good at, we're not very good at making a hypothesis and figuring out if the hypothesis works. And then if it doesn't, going back to the drawing board and reworking it. What happens now is that we find a problem, we find a solution, we dump everything into the solution, and then we sit there and hope that it works. And then if it doesn't, it's like, oh, well, we just spent $1 trillion on that and we can't go backwards. Right. So we need to be smarter about how we solve problems. And I think the only way that we can be smarter about it is if we do smaller bits. And if we look at things literally, I mean, one person at a time might be too small, but I mean, that's the only way that it's worked for us. And it's been, that I don't think it can happen any other way. I mean, it really needs to be about relationship, really needs to be about relationship. So,
and people change. I mean, all of us change. Every few years, we're totally different people than we were a few years past. And we just want to share those stories. Because I know a lot of you are saying, well, we already do that. We've done that. We have John, we have Susan. But not everyone has those experiences. So we need to share them. And you need to hear good job. You did a great job. You need to hear good life.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about, you may have said this, Mary Ellen, but where will people be able to find the recording once it's up?
Well, I think we'll probably post it on the State Council webpage.
Okay.
So that would be the easiest, I think, for everyone on this webinar to access. So I'll ask Charlotte to do that as soon as she gets it. I did want to say too, Kirk, there's a question from someone who's asking, it sounds like more about the home and community-based service waiver that Laura was just speaking of. Worried about people who are in sub-minimum wage jobs, losing those jobs, and then what will happen to them. So
you'll have to work with those people, and you're going to have to find a new life for them, and something that they never imagined. And you're only going to learn that through really deep listening and exploring what more is possible for that person. But those sub-minimum wage jobs, yes, they're not gone already. They certainly will be soon.
Yeah.
Our system is in a huge transformation, and COVID-19 just made it all happen at once.
Right. And I know that there was a question about volunteering, and yes, and volunteering is great. I volunteer all over the place, and I think it does bring a feeling of contribution. I just want to make sure that if we, let's say we find some place for somebody to volunteer and it feels good, that we don't just stop there, that it's not just, I want to make sure that we don't just assume that that's it, so all of this is about, let's not just stop, the wheel of what more is possible just means we can't stop. The curiosity needs to keep going. And, let's say we find somebody a part-time job someplace, and, if we stopped, James would still be working at the smoothie store, or James would still be working at Walmart, where he didn't feel contribution and he was part of a cog. It just doesn't mean anything. It's a job. Yes, he was making money. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he was helping support his little family. Yes, but it didn't fill him up. Now he's part of a team that matters. He's one of the people at a team that really makes sense for him. If he was let go at Walmart, they would have never hired him back, because they have 8 million employees that they wouldn't go back and fight for him, right? So, it's like, it's not just about getting a placement. That's the difference. It's about really feeling contribution, really feeling belonging, really feeling a part of that structure of wherever somebody's feeling it.
Right.
Beth and Kirk, there's a question in the question and answer. It reads, I am the family member of a person with a disability. As a family, we are eager to pursue these 5 valued experiences, but the systems for providing direct support don't seem to be willing to offer support outside of sheltered works. Any idea how we can move forward? That's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, that is. So keep going with the conversation. Outside of, I don't know where you live or what, I think keep asking the question of different providers that might be interested in doing that. Not every provider is built the same. I think every provider has different things that they're good at. I don't know who's providing the services for your family member. Everybody's got their niche, I think. And I think some providers are really good at this. Some providers are really good at this. I think everybody's got their game, right? And so
I have a question for Laura and Mary Ellen. Would somebody in that particular situation be able to approach their local state council and talk about this and ask for guidance and resources on how to navigate those waters when they feel like the only thing that they're being offered is sheltered work?
Of course,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mary Ellen.
Oh, well, that, and I would suggest that they start listening in on the Self-Determination Advisory Committee meetings, because self-determination will be open to everyone next June. So we're going to, in San Diego, and it will be open to a larger audience, we'll have another info session on June 24th, just for people who hadn't had the opportunity to learn more about self-determination initially. We want to get people up to speed on that, because it kind of concerns me when someone in that chat also talked about how with home and community-based services, denying people the opportunity to work at sub-minimum wage, they'll be forced into other programs. Hopefully no one's going to be forced into anything. And that's what's making this so essential, that person-centered, genuine, true, honest, person-centered planning is started now, so that people can identify what they want and utilize other opportunities like tailored day services.
Right, Mary Ellen,
Just in everything. Oops, sorry, Laura.
This person just jumped in and said they're from a small town and they don't have a lot of choices. So I wanted to mention not only self-directed services, that's going to take a while. There's something you can use immediately, and it's called participant-directed services. And that's when you find somebody who you think might be a good fit for your son or daughter, or for yourself. A self-advocate can do this also. And they are hired, and they're paid by an agency that will handle the payroll. And you can do that for respite, for daycare, for independent living skills, for personal assistance. It's been opened up during the COVID time, and that can give you your son or daughter or yourself some new experiences right away. It can be used very creatively. And so you want to talk to your service coordinator about that. You just find a friend or a family member and away you go.
Laura, they want you to repeat that. Participant what?
participant-directed services. It's been around for a long time for daycare and nursing services and respite services, but the Department of Developmental Services opened it up for independent living skills, which is fabulous, and for personal assistance, and also for supported employment, but that's more complex because you have to have an open case with the Department of Rehab. But it allows you, especially if you live in a small town. I just talked to some folks up on one of our Hoover reservation up here, up north. It gives you the opportunity to look within your community, which is quite tight right now, and or a family member, and they can be employed to give your son or daughter or yourself an experience that you're wanting.
Dan Strauss.
Conversation. We could do a follow-up with our next learning festival and have somebody who's doing participant-directed services share that story. That's what
I think Dan Strauss's comment is great. It says, as a community of change agents, we need to help each other with resilience.
That's
Support
true.
each other through
Dan's a wise man.
Yes, as we change the systems. Thank you for your life-changing work. That's it, people. I mean, Dan nailed it. We do need.
Drop the mic, Dan. That's awesome.
Okay, so should we close off our festival for today? And once again, we are asking you to connect with us, and let's bring forth people's stories and how they're navigating the world, and pray for a good life for everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kirk and Beth, for being so free with your presentation to allow it to be posted. That is incredibly generous. They're a lot of work. Bye-bye. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.